So welcome everyone. Welcome to part two of the API Lifecycle sessions. There was a part one a month back about building and testing an API. This week we'll be focused on monitoring and deploying an API. Before we get started, let's introduce ourselves. So my name is Arlemi. I'm a senior developer located at Postman, and I'm located in London in the UK, and I'm here with Ruby. Ruby, who are you?
I'm Ruby. I'm a technical enablement architect here at Postman. I've been here at Postman for almost a year now, so wanted to share that I'm really passionate about enabling folks to build the things that matter to them.
Which is what we're going to do today, so that's good. So that's us. Very briefly, let's learn about you as well, very briefly. So we have a few questions that I'm going to prompt right now. So you should be seeing a little poll on your screen, 3 questions. First, we want to know who attended the previous session. It's fine if you didn't. We'll anyway go through what they did last time. We kind of want to get a sense of your familiarity with API first. And then the last one is just how much experience do you have with Postman? Already seeing a ton of people answering. Keep going. We'll give you a few more minutes. But it's very interesting to see this data move here and there. So
very quickly, yeah.
Yeah, it's very quick. So let's give you 1 more minute. I'm already seeing that most people attended the previous session, so that's good. But anyway, it's going to help you, but we'll be going through it anyway. All right, so let me end this poll. Hopefully everyone had a chance to answer. If you didn't, it's all good. We'll have more polls throughout the sessions. So for the next one, make sure you press your answer faster. So let's look at these results. 58% of you were present at the last sessions. So we'll say it's still a 50-50 split, which is good to know that we have people coming from either the previous sessions or from outside. Surprisingly, and it kind of reflects what we do at Postman, which is like talking about API first more and more. We have most people that know about API first and quite a few people that are pretty experienced with it. So you have 7% of you that have more than 3 years of experience with API first. But there's still 25% of you who do not have experience. So we'll be going through what API first means and the API first development lifecycle. And then there's still a few of you that do not have any experience with Postman. That's also totally fine. And then we can see there's actually 18% that have more than 3 years of experience. And I'm trying to do math quickly, but I would say that's about 70% that have between some experience and 3 years of experience. So that's good to know. Wait, actually, Ruby, would you be like probably in the experience side of API first? Would you call yourself?
I've been exposed to APIs for maybe 1 to 2 years, actually, so not too long. I guess if we're counting years.
True. Yeah, I guess years and experience are a bit different. So let's start with the polls and move on to what we're going to do today. And I think Ruby, you're going to walk us through that.
Yeah. So taking a look at our learning objectives here, there's a number of things that you as a participant in this session should be able to walk away with. So first, you should be able to establish a process for deploying your API to multiple environments. You should feel confident about tracking your deployments to your connected gateway. You should also be able to use Newman in your CI/CD integrations. Finally, you should be able to schedule tests using monitors, then also review, monitor, run results through any relevant integrations. Here is the rundown for today's API Lifecycle Part 2. We'll be using some language that might be unfamiliar to some folks, so we thought we'd introduce those folks to these key terms. Then we'll show you all what API deployment looks like from Postman. We'll then use Newman in a CI/CD integration. Finally, we'll schedule and review tests with monitors and their connected integrations. Of course, we'll try to make some time to address questions shared in the Q&A box as well. Like I mentioned earlier, there's some language that you'll hear us using quite often. So here's a snapshot of that language. Let's take a closer look at our first key term, CI/CD. So CI/CD stands for continuous integration and continuous delivery or deployment. This is what developers often use to automate processes like building, testing, and deploying code. CI/CD helps us reduce and eliminate sometimes the need for manual intervention. So we have Newman here, and Newman might be pretty familiar to Postman fans out there. It's Postman's command line collection runner. It allows us to run and test a Postman collection using shell scripts directly from the command line. This ability to run from the command line makes it very easy to plug into a build system. Hint, hint.
And I'll move on with the two next ones. API Gateway, which just like the previous words that Ruby just went through, you'll hear a lot about, mostly from me. But an API Gateway is what large organizations use to scale their APIs. I say large organization, it can be mid-size as well. I mean, even if you're a small organization now, you may be starting with that. But one of these large organizations that uses API Gateway is Red Hat. And the way they define it is exactly what the API Gateway does. We vary from one implementation to another, but some of the common functions of an API Gateway are authentication, so making sure the right people are accessing your API, routing, getting some requests in and sending it to different places, rate limiting, you don't want someone to spam your API, so you can actually handle that from the API Gateway, billing, monitoring, analytics, alerts, etc. The last thing that we want to go through is the API Development Lifecycle. You may have seen this from other places, but the way we talk about the API Development Lifecycle, these are first two different cycles, one for the producer and one for the consumer. So just to be clear, the producer is people who create APIs, and then the consumer is you as a developer when you're going to go out there and try to use an API. It could be the Postman API, it could be the Twitter API, whatever. So you can see these are two cycles. The reason for that is because it's not just a straight line. You don't start somewhere and you have an endpoint. It's all a cycle. So you start from designing the first version of your API, you develop it, test it, securely deploy it, etc. But then you learn from your usage, or maybe you want to create a new version, and then you go back to the design phase and keep on improving it that way. The same way with the consumer, but I'm not going to spend too much time on that because these sessions are focused on the producer side. So hopefully all of this is clear. Did I forget anything, Ruby?
No, you pretty much hit the nail on the head there.
Okay, cool. In that case, let's move on to the hands-on part, where we'll pray the demo gods that everything works as planned. But hopefully it should all be good. So the learning material, so whatever we're going to build today, will be shared on this workspace after the session, but it's not there yet. So do not jump there for now. Follow along and see what we're building, and then once the session is over, we'll share it there and you can find it. So I'm going to move to Postman, and I want to make sure that I go through what was created in the previous session. So if you were not there, what they did in the previous session, they created an API. So I'm here. This is my Postman workspace, and I can see on the left I have this API tab that I'm going to go to, and I can see there's an ice cream shop API. So that's the one that my colleagues Ian and Vaishnavi created in the previous session. So they have a version 1 of the API, and if we look at the documentation, we can see it's a fictional ice cream store that allows people to order and see the menu of for their favorite desserts. And we can see that API has two endpoints, one /menu endpoint and one /order. And then we can actually dig deeper and see that this one is a GET request to fetch the current inventory, and then this one is a POST request to create a new order. So the way we can see that is because it's generated directly from this API definition that they also created in the last session. So this is an OpenAPI 3, if you're not familiar with it, which describes, again, the different paths, methods, parameters, etc. We're not going to go deep into that. We have a previous session as well on that you can catch. So that's what we have. They also created a mock server. So a mock server is a server that is generated from that same API definition and allows you to start querying fake data. Maybe it's for your documentation team to start documenting how the API reacts. Maybe it's for your front-end team to start integrating with it. And we can actually see that mock server right here. And we would be able to create that if we wanted to. But the mock server is what it is. It's just a mock server. It's not a real API. It's not live. So now let's look into how we can make that API live. So one of the things that you may notice in that UI, at the top here, we have these tabs: overview, definition, documentation, test, deployments, and monitoring. And this looks a lot like the API development lifecycle that we went through. So you start with defining your API, then you can start documenting it. Another team is probably testing it, and then Once that is ready, you can go on and deploy it. So that integration, for now, we support the AWS API Gateway. So that's the one I'm going to get to demo today. And just to be able to deploy, I need to create a placeholder for that API on AWS. So this is my AWS account. I'm not showing you the login process. Hopefully you're familiar with that. But I'm in the service that is called API Gateway. And I can create a new API here. So I'm going to choose HTTP API and build one. I'll give it a name. And it's going to be ice cream store API. Okay. And I'm going to leave it all to default. I don't need to create any routes because that's going to be generated from Postman. I don't need to configure any stages. That's one place where I could, if I wanted to work with different stages, let's say one stage, one development, and one production, I could actually do it here. We're going to look into that a bit further. And then don't have any routes, not any stage. I'm just going to create just so I have this empty API gateway that can hold what I'm going to deploy. So that's ready to go. Let's move back to Postman and start the integration. I'm going to click on AWS API Gateway here. There's two authentication methods here. I'm going to choose access key because that's what I have generated and that's what I have handy at hand that I can copy paste so we don't waste too much time. So I'm going to go ahead and bring my access key here. And then
Arlemy, if we wanted to, we could use IAM, right?
Yeah, so you can use IAM, especially we mentioned API Gateway are mostly used in mostly by large accounts. So these accounts would have huge teams of developers, different squads, etc., and all of their permissions would be set through IAM. So that would maybe make it a lot more easier to handle who's got access to what. In my case, because it's a simple demo, I went for access key because I'm going to be the only one using this one.
That makes sense.
So I'm gonna give it a quick name here. Let's create, and then set the AWS region. So I know that mine is in US East 2. And once I've set that, here Postman goes and fetches all the gateways that are available. So I'm going to select that one because that's the one that I had. Now I have the option to import a schema. In the case where I had actually initialized my API gateway with a schema, I could bring it here. That's not what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to deploy from Postman. So I'm going to say maybe later. And then I can actually move on to deploying my API. So I can see here, I have this default stage. There's no active deployment because I've not started that yet. So let me go ahead and deploy that. I can select my version. Maybe I have different version of the API and I want to deploy them to different stages. I could set that from here, but for now, I'm just going to leave it this way. And once that's done, successfully exported, I can see that I have this stage. And to verify that it's actually happened, I can move back here, move to my routes, and I can see here I have the same API that is now available in AWS. So a menu endpoint, order endpoint, and two methods. So that's the main step, making it available on the API gateway. Now I do need to instruct the API gateway where this request needs to go. So I'm going to select this get endpoint and I tell them this request goes to a Lambda function. So that's one that I've created before. Lambda is the serverless service that you have available on AWS, and I have created one that returns the menu. I'm just going to attach it here. And then I'm going to do the same for the order endpoint. So I can select my other Lambda function that is place an order and create it. So this could be something else. I just use Lambda because it's easier. You may have maybe your team that has created a Kubernetes service somewhere that you might want to query. It could be anything. So once I have that, I can start from Postman creating that API. So if you click here on the little arrow, I can see the URL I can use. And I can actually grab this. And because I'm in Postman, I can start sending my requests from here. So let's try the menu endpoint. Slash menu. And there I go. I get the response back from my API. Could use it in once. Maybe not. I get the response from my API. This went to the API Gateway. The Gateway knew that it had to redirect it to do some routing to my Lambda function, and then in return what I had to get. So that is a good first step. And now what we may want to do is replace the mock server URL that we had in our collection right here with that live server URL, and that's what we're going to monitor. So I'm going to quickly create an environment, which is going to be called production, and I'm going to have a variable called server URL, and that's the URL of my deployed API gateway. So that's it for the deployment. You may notice here, let's save that. You may notice here when we're in AWS that we have other steps here, stages in the deploy menu or metrics. We'll look into that later when we go into monitoring. But before we move into the next part, I do have a quick question for you. I've talked a lot about API Gateway. I might not be pronouncing it right, that I know, but hopefully you understood every time I said it. But I'm going to prompt you with a little poll, which is an API Gateway poll. And the question is, what are some common functions of an API Gateway? So I mentioned that when I defined the API Gateway. Hopefully you remember most of the ones that I mentioned. This is a multiple choice questions. So it might be all of them, it might be none of them, might be only a few of them. Let's give you, okay, everyone's answering now.
Nice. A lot of folks are thinking it's for authentication, routing.
We can see, yeah, routing, authentication. I think clearly most people think that is for that. Okay, let's end the poll and display it for everyone so we can all see the same results. So routing, authentication for sure. We've actually seen the routing live just in the demo now. Authentication, 92% thought it was for that. We mentioned it. I did not demo it, but when I was in AWS, you could see there was a place where I could add authentication. Rate limiting, billing and monitoring. I can see billing is not a lot of people. 16% of the people thought it was for it. It is actually a feature of an API gateway as well. We did not demo it at all, but it is one of them that I think I mentioned. But now seeing the results, I'm worried I did not mention it. Rate limiting and monitoring also, we can do that. And monitoring, we'll actually look at that in the second part. With that said, I think we're ready to move on to the next demo. So we've seen how to deploy, but we mentioned different stages, etc. Let's look how we can do CI/CD in Postman. I'm going to stop sharing the results. There we go.
Cool. Just double checking here, Arlemy, you are able to see my workspace here, correct?
Yep.
Perfect. Yep. So that was awesome. I loved seeing how we could use AWS and deploy to AWS through Postman. Now I'll start talking to you all about Newman and CI/CD. So having a CI/CD pipeline, as I'm sure a lot of us know, is great when you need your development lifecycle steps automated. Some benefits to using pipelines as part of your software development strategy include automation of building and testing whenever there's a new commit on the code base, having standardized feedback loops, and having faster product iterations as new code can get pushed through to production with little to no manual intervention. Newman, as we discussed earlier, is an NPM package and Postman's CLI companion to run collections. Newman's going to help us automate and execute tasks. So let's first make sure that we can run our collection successfully in Postman.
So you want it, why would you run it in Postman before? Sorry.
Oh, great question. So we want to make sure that we address any errors if they're present before we dive in too deep. Now, I totally trust our colleagues, Ian and Vaishnavi. I'm sure they left things unbroken, but it never hurts to quadruple check to see that everything is working just fine and tests are passing, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm just going to go ahead and find our API here. We have the ice cream shop API. We have our one and only version. I'll open that up. And like Arlemy discussed earlier, there's a couple tabs here, but I'm going to jump into the test tab. And I see our ice cream shop collection already associated here as a test suite. When I hover over it, I do see this option to run a test. I'm looking for the collection runner in Postman. There's a couple different ways to get to it, but if we're trying to have a source of truth here in the API tab, then it just makes sense to run things right through here. So I'm going to select the Run Test button here, and it already opens up the collection runner, which is exactly what I was looking for. Because I'm just testing this to see if everything's okay, I don't really care for any extra details. I'll just have one iteration and run this collection. Amazing, got a couple of 200s, so there's no errors in the collection. However, this does not satisfy me. I want to be able to use Newman eventually in a pipeline script. So yes, I do want to use Newman in a pipeline script. And I want to make sure that I'm able to use Newman in isolation with this collection before I start plugging it into a pipeline and getting too into the weeds. So I'm actually going to grab the collection JSON link here. If I go hover over this and find my associated collection, if I go into the share collection option here, I can grab my JSON link. I'm going to need this for my Newman run. There's a couple different ways you can run a collection with Newman, but I prefer using the JSON link. And I'm going to see if I remember my MacBook shortcuts. Command tab to get to my terminal.
One of the benefits of the JSON link is that it's a snapshot. So when people edit the collection and if they break it, it doesn't actually break your collection JSON because it needs to be manually updated. So that's one of the, I think that's one of the benefits.
Fun fact. So yeah, that's good to know. I did just grab my JSON link and I'm going to start my command line with, I'll just redo it here so it's a little bit more obvious. My command's going to be Newman run. And my machine knows what I'm talking about when I use this command because I already have Newman installed on my machine as well as Node. So it knows what's going to happen. If your machine, when you're trying this later on, sends you some errors saying it doesn't recognize Newman, that's just probably because you don't have it installed. So I'm going to do Newman run and just paste in that JSON link. And hopefully I get some success messages before my sentence is even finished. I have a couple 200s here again. And Newman has this handy dandy table here, giving me a quick overview of what's been executed. Again, no failures. Awesome. I don't see any errors. Gonna shift back into Postman here. Still, there we go. Perfect. Awesome. So I want to recap really quickly what I did because it was a little quick. We just made sure that our collection can run successfully, and we saw that Newman is able to run locally. This is super important because when we get to adding Newman in our pipeline, we might be confronted with errors, and we want to be better able to understand what to rule out as a root cause for any bugs later down the line. So now that we've done that, we're ready to get our CI/CD ball rolling. So onward and upward into Jenkins. Now, I remember Arlemy mentioned something about having a placeholder in AWS prior to having his integration set up. I have a hunch that I might have to do something similar. So in my API tab again here, looking at my first version, actually, let me just clean up a little bit. I don't need these anymore. I'm back in my test tab. So just below that test suite, this associated collection, I do see an option to connect to a CI/CD build. I have Circle CI as an option, Jenkins, and Travis CI. Today, I want to focus on Jenkins because that's just my tool of choice. So I'm going to open this up to try to attempt to create an integration. Right away, Postman says I need to give this integration a nickname, provide a URL, enter a username, an auth token, and specify which project in Jenkins I want to work with. I don't actually have one yet, so I want to make sure that I create that kind of skeleton that Postman can refer to. So let me actually do that. I'm going to leave this right where it is, and I'm going to go into Jenkins. And this is my dashboard, which might look familiar to some folks who are also using Jenkins. This is just your landing page. You get a quick view into all of your different projects, whether they're freestyle projects, pipelines, or others. What I'm going to do is go into New Item, and just pausing here for a second, there's a couple things that you should probably know about Jenkins. Jenkins' primary use cases are for build automation and automated testing, which is kind of the core of continuous integration. It's also used to deploy to pre-production and production servers. Jenkins features are available through plugins, and they help with continuous integration like automated testing, which is what we'll be doing with Jenkins today. If there's anything that you see us doing as we navigate through Jenkins that you don't see in your instance of Jenkins, chances are that there's a plugin for that, which you can download from the plugins, manage plugins menu in the dashboard. So let me get back to setting up my skeleton here within the new item navigation.
And quick question, everything you're going to demo with Jenkins would be similar for Travis CI and Circle CI?
That is a fantastic question. The pipeline script might look very familiar, but obviously the navigation and the UI will be a little bit different since it is a different platform. So going back here to set up my skeleton, I'm going to call it something very unique and interesting. Then I'm going to scroll down, and just to make the most of our time here together, I do have previous integrations that I've used in Postman for other APIs, and the scripting is going to be very similar with a couple of different unique lines of code. So I'm just going to copy over a previous integration that I have, or copy over a script from a previous integration that I have, and make some changes that will be unique to this one. Awesome. So just keeping in mind that my goal right now is just to have that sort of placeholder skeleton pipeline, just to have something to refer to for the integration in Postman. I'm not going to get into the nitty-gritty of what's going on here, but pretty much this is like an instruction manual for Jenkins. There's a quick description of what you'll find here and what this pipeline is going to hopefully achieve. You can have it connected to a repository if you have one. And then down below on the bottom here, you have your pipeline script. There's a quick mention of Kubernetes here, which I will go into detail about in a moment. And then there's a number of stages down here. And I see some hashes, which tells me that this is probably where I want to enter some unique values. And I have another hunch that this is going to be coming from Postman. So I'm going to leave this here. We've had kind of a heads up just looking at it. I'm going to save it. It's not going to do anything yet because it's not pointing to anything in Postman yet, but it is our reference. Cool. So I have something called Live Space Camp Demo. I'm going to go back to Postman, and I'll start this integration workflow. Just call it the same thing. And as soon as I start entering my Jenkins server URL, Postman starts yelling at me about needing a secure server. If you've been using Jenkins locally, you probably have a server URL that looks something like this. Oops, not question marks. That would be interesting if you did. That might be something that you'd see if you're running this locally. This is, according to Postman, super insecure. Unsecure? Not secure. One of those. But yeah, what Postman is looking for is for you to have an encryption layer on your protocol here. So it's looking for an HTTPS. It also doesn't like localhost, so I'm going to get rid of that. Thankfully, my team... Yep.
Would it block the integration there?
Yeah, so Postman does not want to transfer data to anything on your local instance. It wants to make sure that you have that encryption. So I'm going to use my Teams account, which is thankfully on a secure server. Cool. And it looks like Postman stopped yelling at me, which is amazing. My username is actually my email. I'm expecting tons of spam.
Public email.
And I'm going to throw in my auth token here, which I have handy dandy. This actually came from the Jenkins UI, and I just saved it in a notepad here on the side. So I'm just going to grab that. Cool. So now I should have access to all of my Jenkins projects, but I want to use that skeleton because remember, again, I wanted to have something to reference. Now I do have something to reference, and I'm going to refer to it. Then connect. Awesome. So that pipeline has no history. It has never been run before, so there's really nothing to see here. Postman does prompt me, however, to configure Newman, and I know my end goal here is to use Newman in the pipeline script, so this is probably what I want to do. So I'm going to select configure Newman either from here or up in the top right corner. I'll choose this one. And I'll select the collection that's associated with this API. And Postman is just so wonderful. It provides me this boilerplate script that I can just kind of plug and play. However, my instance of Jenkins has some unique lines of code in it that I don't want to finagle or change around, especially pertaining to the agent, because we're using Kubernetes and there's a lot going on there. So I'm just going to look to see what are the most important parts of this script that I want to hold on to, things that could be unique that you wouldn't see in a different integration. So scrolling down here, I know the collection I'm using is going to be unique, so I want to save that, copy it, and enter it into my handy notepad here on the side. I want to save this workspace ID because this will be unique as well. Now, this prefix numeric here under the integration identifier is a very chaotic numeric that you want to save. So I'm going to definitely make sure that that is entered here in my notepad, which I'm not sharing with you for privacy reasons, but I do have it handy. Cool. This is going to be the source of potentially many bugs later down the line if you don't have this numeric exact, because this is referring to this very specific integration. So you want to make sure that you have this exact number, as well as there's obviously the workspace and the collection. So I'm going to finish this and have Postman assume that I used it. I'm going to go back to Jenkins and go into that configuration for that same pipeline. Scroll on down here. So I did talk about Kubernetes very lightly earlier and this agent. Super quickly, the agent in a Jenkins pipeline functions as a directive. It's specifying where to execute tasks. In our case, we're going to want it to execute in a pod, which is deployed in a Kubernetes cluster. That's not going to be everybody's case. For example, if you're running Jenkins locally, you might be just fine with any agent. But to put it really, really briefly, Kubernetes as a learning topic is beyond the scope of this session, but my team at Postman uses Kubernetes because it allows us to run multiple Jenkins jobs builds in parallel, leveraging Jenkins' own controller agent model. That background context on Kubernetes is pretty important to share because you'll notice in the pipeline that we're using, a Kubernetes pod is mentioned under agent, just here. So scrolling down into our pipeline here, just under these details about our agent, you'll see a couple stages. This might look familiar because something like this was available in that Postman integration workflow. There were different stages available for you to copy paste. My stages I've named based on what's going on in them. So in my first stage, I have install Newman and my reporters. Taking a look at what that looks like, I'm installing Newman here via npm. I'm then installing the HTML extra reporter, and I'm installing the Postman Cloud reporter. So
what are these reporters?
Fantastic question, Arlemy. First, let me just backtrack a little bit with Newman here. A quick note, whenever you're installing reporters, they should be installed in the same space as Newman. So on this same command, or this line here, I have Newman installed with my reporters. But back to Arlemy's question here about the reporters. HTML Extra is a reporter that I personally care about when I'm using Jenkins because it provides this really neat, user-friendly way to check out the details of a Newman run. So once I run this build, there should be a report available within Jenkins for me to kind of inspect what's been going on with the Newman run. This other reporter, the Postman Cloud reporter, just gonna mosey over here. The Postman Cloud reporter is that handshake, that connection between Jenkins and Postman, which is gonna allow Jenkins to share its build information in Postman. So eventually, fingers crossed, the end result that we want to see is Jenkins sharing information to Postman in that API tab so we can kind of see everything in one space and not have to jump into Jenkins. Although that might be nice for the HTML extra reporter, but we'll get into that later. So yes, that's what the Postman Cloud reporter is going to do. The next stage here is running the collection with credentials and executing on those reporters. So within Jenkins, there's a way for you to save your secret texts. So for example, in this pipeline script, I'm going to need to refer to my Postman API key, but I don't want to hard code that into my pipeline. I'm going to eventually be sharing this in Postman. So I don't want any holes for anybody to access my Postman API key. To do that, I have to set up a secret text within the Jenkins UI. And I did that by going up into my account and setting up credentials from there. I set up a secret text, and that secret text ID is called Spacecamp key, not Spaceman, Spacecamp key. And within my script, I'm going to say Postman API key a couple times. That language is going to appear in a number of places. And what this line is doing is letting Jenkins know that every time I say Postman API key, I'm referring to this secret text that I already set up. So that's what this line is all doing. The next line here in this step is running my Newman collection. Now this is where the magic happens. I'm going to replace this with my collection JSON link, which again, I got from the Postman integration workflow. So let me copy that and paste that in here. Sweet. And then I have my reporters just after that. When you use Newman, by default, there's going to be a CLI reporter, but as soon as you start adding new reporters into your script, they'll need to be mentioned here on the follow-up line to this one. And when you're mentioning other reporters, then you also have to mention the CLI. So that's why it's mentioned here, even though that's a default behavior of Newman. Here I am letting Jenkins know what to call my HTML extra report. Here's that reference to the Postman API key again. And over here, I want to enter that unique workspace ID so that information goes to the right workspace. Cool. Scrolling over, there's that very chaotic integration identifier. This is where I want to put that very unique integration number. Gonna copy that.
Hopefully people followed along and they can tell you if it's the wrong number or not.
Yeah, somebody with a hawk eye should be able to confirm. Cool. And here is my last stage down here. It's called publish. And what's going on here is just Jenkins. I'm letting Jenkins know through this script to publish that HTML report in the target directory and just call it HTML report so it's easy to find. Awesome. So fingers crossed, toes crossed. I'm going to save this. Oh, that's not what I was going to do. Let's see, save this. There we go. And because I'm curious, everything's all set up with my pipeline. I'm still in Jenkins. I kind of want to run this build to see if it'll be successful. So I'm just going to hit build now. And on the bottom here, you should see the first build starting up. I could kind of wait around here and twiddle my fingers and wait for some updates here, but I'm very nosy and I want to go into this first build and inspect the console output. Down here, I can see which line of code is being executed. Oops. Looks like it's moving very quickly.
So does it run through all of the stages every time, or can you pick each stage?
If you have these stages scripted in the way that I do, then it will run each one of them. There are options to run some stages in parallel, but I don't have that set up for this script.
Okay.
Awesome. So it says it's a success. Now, this is fine and dandy. I do see that same CLI table that I'm used to seeing for Newman. but I've already seen this. I saw it in my terminal earlier. I'm kind of wondering what's the point of using Jenkins then if it's just doing the same thing. The point for setting up the pipeline and setting up those reporters was to be able to go into the project here and see something called HTML report. So if you remember earlier in my publish stage, I named something HTML report, and that's where I wanted to store my HTML extra report. So I'm going to go in here, and Jenkins' lovely UI has presented me two options, either to go back to my project or select zip. I'm assuming this is where my report lives, so I'm going to select that and open up what just got saved here, pipeline report. Now this is my HTML extra report. I do see a cool toggle here. Nice. I prefer dark mode, so we're just going to check that out. And right away, I see a great summary of the Newman report, or the Newman run. A similar table to what we've already seen, and a couple tabs here for extra details. So I can see details on each request. This is excellent for folks who are testing and need some more details on their Newman runs. I can see what's failed and anything that's been skipped. So this is awesome. However, this lives in Jenkins. And again, my goal here was to have everything live in Postman. So I'm going to jump back into Postman and see if anything was updated here, because I do have a build that I just ran. Cool. So if I open this up, I see the collection runs. At a high level, I can see everything was a success, which is great. I also see an option to run the build right here from Postman. If I go back into this view, which we're very used to seeing now since we've been in the API tab for a little bit, in the test tab, now instead of having that option to start the integration, I see my source here is Jenkins, and I see that same run build option here, and I see my first build. I could hit run build here again, but we already know what's going to happen there because we ran a build already. And so in summary, we just used Newman in a CI/CD build that we set up in Jenkins and integrated that with Postman. I have a really quick poll for you all just to see where your heads are at with CI/CD. And the poll question here is, what are the benefits of using pipelines as part of your software development strategy? Let's see what you all think.
I can't answer. It blocks me from answering.
Oh, we'll never know Arlemi's answer. See, a lot of folks think it's all of the above. Some folks think it's automation of DevOps practices. 2% think it might be just standardized feedback loops. This was a little bit of a trick question. Cool. So, Arlemi, do you want to share the results or?
Yep. I'll end the poll and show you all the results. So I'm not sure if you were saying it. I'm going to walk through them, but just quickly share my screen as well. So we have 85% of the people that know it's all of the above. I feel like my default when there's an all of the above option is to go for this one. But yeah, it was all of the above. Faster product iterations, standardized feedback loops. And I think you went through that when you defined CI/CD as well, right?
Yes, we did.
Cool. And then automation of DevOps practices, which I think was pretty well shown during the demo. So that was good. Thank you, Ruby. We're back on my side now. I'm also going to clear all of these tabs because we don't need all of these. But one of the point, and I'm going to go through that again, I think we can't emphasize that enough, is we want that API builder to be the source of truth for everyone in your team, maybe your documentation team, your testing team, or DevOps team, because now as the DevOps team, I can just go from here and run my builds. My whoever team is responsible might be DevOps team as well for deployment. But now let's look at the monitoring side of things. The demo guys have been very nice until now. Let's hope it stays that way. I'm just going to stop sharing the results. I don't think we need that on the screen. So let's move on to monitoring. We saw how we were seeing the results from the mock servers. That's fine and all, but it's still always like an action from your end to send this request and see what's happening. What we want to do is have something that runs on a regular basis and tells you, okay, my API is still up, my API is still up, my API is still up. So one way to do that is to use monitors in Postman. So I have this collection that my colleague had created. I'm going to create a monitor based on that one. So I'll create a new one from here, add monitor, create a new monitor, and I'll use an existing collections. So I'm going to use the ice cream shop, which is the only collection I have in this workspace. And then here I have a few options. So I'll give that monitor a name. It's going to call ice cream shop monitor. And I'm going to give it an environment. The reason why I'm giving this environment is because I created that production environment earlier on this session, where I put the production URL. And that's what I want to try. I do care about my mock to be up, but I care a lot more about my production URL to be up. I have a few options in when I want to run it, with a weekly timer, minute, hour. Let's make it as frequent as we can, every 5 minutes. And then I could select different regions. Let's say I have users in different regions, or maybe my API gateway is set to different regions. I could test for each of them. But in this case, I'm going to keep it automatically select. I'm going to untick receive email notifications. First, because I have way too many emails. Second, because I'll figure another way to get alerted if something goes wrong. And then there's a few other questions. Set the request timeout, set delay between requests. And I think we had questions about request timeouts in the Q&A. So you're able to actually set that here if you want to make it bigger. And then there's enable SSL validation, etc. So once this is all set, I can create that monitor, and hopefully it creates it. Cool. I have a monitor, so I can validate it. So that is just going to check that it's valid based on the API definition. And then I can run it the same way we do it for the test collection. I can run it from here. So I can see my last runs here. They're all green, which is great. If I want to actually dig deeper, I can click on the ice cream shop monitor name, and this will show me that nice UI that tells me this is when it ran. I can see the test results. If I wanted to see the console logs, I could as well. This is good, but my team may be using other tools. Postman is one way to monitor your API. There's other tools that maybe you're monitoring other things at scale, and you might be familiar with a few of these. New Relic, Datadog, Big Panda, etc. So we'll see how we can actually push that data that I'm getting from Postman to New Relic to kind of meet my developers where they are again, or my SRE team, for example, where they are. So I'll go here and connect with a new app. So I'll click on Add next to it, and I'll choose this Send Your Monitor Run Metrics to New Relic option. Just make sure I'm on the right tab here, Post Monitoring Results. So I'll copy over my New Relic API key, and then choose the monitor that I want to send the data from to New Relic. So that's the ice cream shop monitor that I just created. And that's about it. I can click connect. Hopefully I have the right API key. I can see it's connected here. So let's send it, maybe trigger it a couple of times just to make sure that we have some data that is generated. And then we can go in there, view the metrics. If you're not familiar with New Relic, it's a lot of graphs and a lot of data. I'm not familiar with all of it, but one thing you can do, you can actually group by monitor name, which makes it easier to find what you're looking for. And you can also change the timeline. So I'm only interested in the last 10 minutes. And I can see in the last 10 minutes, I actually have only one monitor that run, which is the ice cream shop monitor. And you can see here, I'm actually looking at the size of the request bytes. I could change the value I want to see. Maybe I want to see the number of 200 HTTP stages that I got, etc. And the point in that is, again, that your team may be already using these tools, and we just want to be able to integrate with all of them. Maybe your team already has alerts set up. I mentioned how you could find different ways to be alerted if something fails. So we have this push to New Relic where you could have some alerts there, but we also are able to get data from New Relic sent back to Postman and then integrate in Postman with maybe PagerDuty to get alerts, status page the same way. So
Arlemy,
that's,
sorry.
yeah, go for it.
I have a quick question for you. Who would benefit from these kinds of integrations with monitors? Do you know?
Who?
Yes.
I want to say everyone in your in your tech team. I feel like the benefit being that you can get that data in places where we may have data coming from other sources, and you can then put some correlation in between. I wouldn't say there's a specific role that would benefit from it. A lot of the roles, any data team, any SRE team again. I don't know if you had a specific one in mind.
Oh yeah, I was just thinking SREs could definitely benefit from something like this, but it is pretty flexible. Lots of folks could benefit.
Cool. I'm looking at the time. At the same time, we have 5 minutes left. So I want to make sure we have time to share you some more links, etc. So I'm going to end the demo here. Just quickly going through what we've done. We started from an existing API that was an ice cream shop API. We've deployed it to the AWS API Gateway. Then Ruby showed us how you can, from Postman, create Jenkins integration, and it could be another one. It could have been Travis CI, Circle CI, to handle your CI/CD directly from Postman using Newman and extra reporters. And then I just showed you how you can monitor that same API and connect it with other third-party tools to send that data to these tools. So I'm going to move back to the slides right here. Ruby, do you want to take it over?
Yeah, for sure. So having gone through everything in this session, you should now feel more comfortable with the following learning outcomes. You should be able to establish a process for deploying your API to multiple environments. You should feel confident about tracking your deployments to your connected gateway. You should be able to use Newman in your CI/CD integrations. And finally, you should be able to schedule tests using monitors. So what's next? There's a few things that we have cooking up at Postman that you can expect to see soon. We have a new deployment integration coming for Apigee. We'll be seeing an environment changelog. You saw us use Jenkins for CI/CD today. We currently have Travis CI and Circle CI available, as well for the same kind of integration. But we'll soon have Bitbucket and GitLab added to that lineup. There's a whole lot more in the works. If you're curious, you can check out our public roadmap, which we try to keep updated. Cool, so here are those links that Arlemy was alluding to earlier. These are additional resources. If you'd like to check out previous Basecamp sessions and stay updated on which sessions are coming up, check out our Basecamp page. We do have an in-person session coming up next week, so you'll find some information there about that. If you're looking for a nice challenge, which really helps you get your feet wet with the Postman product, check out our 30 Days of Postman challenge. We also have a community forum where you can get a pulse on what other Postman users are working on or wondering about. And then feel free to check out some answers to frequently asked questions over in our Postman Answers workspace too.
Thank you. So before we leave you and before we move on to the Q&A quickly, this is the link to the survey that I mentioned also at the very start. We'd like your feedback. Was it too long, too short? Did you want to learn more? Did you want to learn less? I don't know, maybe this happens. Just make sure you go to that URL. I think it's going to be pasted in the chat anyway, so you'll be able to click on it and give your feedback. I'm going to move to the next slide where the link is there still anyway, so you can still find it and move on to Q&A. So I'm going to have a look at the questions that were asked during the session, and we'll take them. So about the product roadmap, I know you've just talked about it. I'm actually going to throw that question over to you. I don't know if you're aware. Do you know if there's any support for pushing monitoring metrics to Kibana?
I don't know if I've seen that on the roadmap just yet, but we can definitely take a look at our resources, and if we find them, share them out.
And I think we also have the any feature request that you have. We have a GitHub repository called Postman App Support. You can put your request there. The more requests for specific integration we get, the more chances it will be integrated soon. So make sure you go in there. We have another question from Dennis about the product roadmap. Are there plans to add customization for monitor timeouts? Actually, Demo just that. So hopefully that was helpful. We can now up the timeout but as much as we want on the monitor, the same way you can do it in the Postman app. I'll have a last look. We have Chandu Mohammed who says, any sneak peek? No sneak peek today. We actually did one in the last webinar, but we don't have any for you today. And then we had a few questions still about like more integration. I see people are hungry for more integrations. Postman, as you probably have noticed during this session, we want it to be the place where all the teams can meet. And the point is not to recreate or reinvent the wheel. We want to be integrating with most of these third-party tools as possible, as we can. So do put all of your requests on our GitHub repository. We look at them and we aim to support as much as we can again. With that said, I think that's most of the questions that we had. So we're a minute to the end. I want to thank you all for joining. Quick reminder that there's an in-person SpaceCamp next week in San Francisco if you happen to be around. And otherwise, we have live streams weekly that you can find on our YouTube channel. It's youtube.com/postman. And we'll soon be announcing more SpaceCamp sessions for the remainder of the year. Thank you all for joining. Thank you, Ruby. And
thank you.
See you next time. Bye-bye.